Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rock That Relationship. We are so excited to be back with you with another season. And this time we are talking about unique issues in relationships. Today we are so excited to have on Jaime Messina, who is a mindset and empowerment coach and also the founder of Club Lilles, which we'll hear all about today in our conversation, because today we're actually talking about later in life lesbians. So welcome, Jaime. Thank you for being on the show here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, maybe we could start out by telling us a little bit about what exactly is a later in life lesbian.
You know what? This is actually a topic that comes up often you'd be surprised at what happens when you create a group like this. Typically later in life lesbian, just somebody who came out later in life. To me, that means, 30s and 40s, but I've learned that the definition really depends on the person. And so if you feel like you've lived the majority of your life in a hetero way, like maybe you got married really young and, from 20 to 25, and then you realized at 25 that you were a lesbian, they consider themselves a later in life lesbian. So I don't know the exact definition. But it's something in there.
Awesome. So like with later in life lesbian, it's usually kind of assumed that this person has somehow led like maybe more of a heterosexual lifestyle for at least a portion, like an adult portion of their life, enough to like have transitioned into realizing or coming out as a lesbian. Is that kind of what the common denominator is?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. They've, maybe had, and so age doesn't necessarily play a big role if you like maybe got married early or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. So my like 5th grade boyfriend that I went roller skating.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
That doesn't count as my like formative heterosexual relationship prior to this. Okay. So that kind of begs the question. So both Tracy and I have talked a lot about the fact that we both came out pretty early on, and I would not consider myself a later in life lesbian. I don't have a lot of experience. And actually, even talking with Tracy, and we have different experiences with this, but I've actually never even been in a relationship with someone who identifies as a later in life lesbian. Pretty much all of them were, from very early on. Some haven't even had any heterosexual relationships at all. And so I don't even know kind of what it's like to be in that space, even kind of peripherally as the partner. So, thinking about that, what are some issues that are unique to later in life lesbians?
By the way, I am also not a later in life lesbian. That's not how the group came about, per se, but I have been working with lots, and, I'll say there are a couple issues. So the first is when they do realize their sexuality and they come out, I feel like they're more questioned about it than maybe people who came out earlier. So they're like, how do you know? Are you sure? You've been married to a man. You have this many kids. Like maybe it's a midlife crisis or something like that. Another issue that they come against are people who have been out for a long time, question if they're actually a lesbian. How do I know you're not going to go back to a man? You've been with a man in the past. That makes me feel weird. And different insecurities come up in that way. And they tend to not feel, for the most part, accepted by the lesbian community, or, they feel like questioned, or like they kind of have like a mark on them. And those really are the main two ones that I've heard.
Yeah. And I was married to a later in life lesbian, and I've dated another one or two self-identified as that. And I do think it is interesting. There is a cultural difference, right? I mean, that's what I've found. So I didn't ever have that heteronormative way of thinking of things. I never was that child, the girl that always wanted to get married. And, you hear these commercials, every girl wants to get married, or every woman wants diamonds. Like none of that. But I have dated people who had that experience growing up. And it's like we're completely different cultures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Corey, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to kind of follow up on that and saying like, is there like, besides the issues they face, is there really a cultural difference? I know you're a coach when you're working with people. Do you do you see that there's actually like a different culture? Particularly, I would say Tracy and I talk a lot about gender norms, right? And I never really had a lot of gender norms set for me, even when things were even more gendered than they are today, because I was with another woman early on and we didn't really have anything heteronormative to go off of. But I have seen, and I don't know if this is a stereotype, but I have seen that there's a lot more like more specific gender norms that sometimes come up with, you know, people who have been in kind of more of a heteronormative lifestyle or, you know, relationships prior. So I don't know about culturally, what kinds of differences do you see?
Yeah, you know, that's crazy. I don't think that's necessarily it. So from what I've seen, because there's a lot of people in this group, right? 8,000 people. So I see what they write and everything like that. I think the gender norms and maybe you and I have a different experience because I have also been out. I knew I was gay since I was 5. I was out since I was 18. And I find that gender norms per se with the people that are more my age are more there than the people who are more my age who have been out longer than the people who are our age that are now coming out, because they're coming out in a time that's very different. Now lesbians look very different than they did when I came out. You know, there was like maybe 2 categories back then. It was like butch and femme or lipstick and sporty dyke, you know, like I don't know if that's about, but and now, you know, they're coming out in a time where there is this huge fluid spectrum of people who in their sexualities and how they present and who dates who and this and that and the other thing. So I haven't really found like these gender norm things specific to the late in life lesbians. But for me personally, people who are my age, who have been out longer, tend to fall into those gender norms more often than younger people per se. But still, I haven't found that like now it's like that specific anymore. You know what I mean?
How old are you?
I'll be 42 next month.
Okay. So I'm 53, Corey's 50. And I have noticed a huge difference. And I did date someone who was 44 and me being over 50. That was another whole cultural thing, right? Just such a different mindset. But I dated the person I was married to was later in life lesbian, but older than me. And it's not so much gender roles as, you know, she was with a husband for 25 years. And so when we would go to parties or whatever, there was an expectation or, you know, in a community that she would be the one to talk to the women and all of that. And I think she was really shocked when, you know, I would be engaging with the women on the same level. Right. And I remember one time we went to a party and then she was like so irritated with me afterwards because it was just a dinner party. So it's just 2 couples and us and the straight couple. And she was like, you left me talking to the man all night. And I'm like, so like, no one's ever told me what gender I can talk to. You know, and it was very interesting. It created a lot of conflict. And I can see people being younger, they don't have that, right? There's just not those issues.
Yeah, it's a different time, that's for sure. Yeah. I mean, I will say this, I tend to end up talking to the men more often, but I mean, probably just have more in common, you know, like, I don't know.
Well, I think that's interesting, right? I think this new generation can just be with people they have more in common with. And because I've gone out and done karaoke and then ended up singing with guys who are in their 20s, right? And like ballads and everything. That wouldn't have happened back in my day, right?
Yeah.
Like no way would you get 20-year-olds singing with some 50-year-old lesbian in a bar, but it's a radically different world. And I think for these later in life lesbians, when they come out, do you find that they tend to kind of be with each other because they do feel kind of isolated from the lesbian community or are shunted aside?
Yeah, I mean, I never like to specifically put people in categories, but yeah, like they feel safer, that's for sure. You know, that's where the whole group even came from. You know, the reason where it even came from was, number one, I saw this like madness on TikTok of all these people during the pandemic realizing their sexuality on TikTok or through TikTok, and I'm noticing that, right? And then I'm also a mindset and empowerment coach. And I had noticed at one point in like 2020, end of 2020, 2021, that like the last 8 clients that had come on with me had the same issue. They all were coming out later in life, either leaving marriages or trying to figure out like where they stand and wanting to know, how do I meet people? How do I connect? I want to relate to other people that are going through the same thing. And I'm like, they're like, where are the resources? And I'd be looking and I didn't know where to find them, or there was probably resources out there, but like when I Googled or looked, like I didn't find much. And I'm like, I don't know, but let's just create this group and see what happens. And then I made a TikTok about it. Right. And like, I'll be honest with you, I made the TikTok. I got sick with COVID the same day and I didn't check it for 24 hours. So I directed them to this group on the TikTok. And then when I went to check, there was like 2,000 people waiting to be approved to join the group. Wow. So I was like, oh crap. So it just kind of like blew up. And I do read when they post that like a lot of them just have this, and I don't want to call it a chip on their shoulder because it's there for a reason, right? There are certain, I think we all know that there's lesbians within our community that are very protective of things or like want to, and they feel that. And I think even though it doesn't represent all of us who have been out for a while, like sometimes it's the loudest or it makes the big, and they kind of just, they feel like imposters as well. I've heard that as well. They feel like imposters in the community because they've lived this experience and because they're so new, I forgot where we started with that question, but
it's, I have to say, like, as a person who's been out for a long time, I was, I'm very skeptical of dating someone who was married to a man. I had a lot of questions. I think you brought them up at the beginning. Like, are you really a lesbian? That persisted through the 8 years of our relationship. Do you want to, will you go back to being with a man? And I mean, I'm old school. And so I have that, like, I wouldn't even have dated a bisexual woman in my 20s or 30s. Now, am I changing because society's changing? It's very interesting. Like, you didn't see these, there were some later in life lesbians back in the day, but there's a lot more now. And I think that's, because we have more freedom as women and as a society. Do you have any idea, like, why? What is the impetus for people coming out later in life?
I mean, I have my thoughts on it. Yeah.
Well, let's hear them. And they're just your thoughts. There's nothing.
I'm not speaking facts, but hey, I was a sociology major. You can either agree with me or not. I mean, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, in your experience when we were younger, and we went out and let's say a straight girl came out with us and then they came around us and they realized, holy shit, I was scared of these lesbians and I thought I'd look it straight, but like, I'm actually attracted to this person and it's not as scary as I thought. And this idea that I had of what lesbians were, my wall is down now and I'm actually connecting with them and they feel that, right? And, we used to joke about it. Well, whoever hooks up with a straight girl gets a toaster, right? You get a consolation prize because it was more often than not that if somebody who identified as straight came out, they usually felt differently about it by the time they left. And what I think now is happening is there's social media. So people who aren't exposed or, might not have never been exposed to lesbians are now being exposed to lesbians. Social media paired with now way more people were stuck in social media, in particular TikTok during the pandemic. Everybody's at home. Not only are they have this stuff in their algorithm, right? Maybe somebody like you or I like come up in their algorithm and they're like, and they stay a little bit too long and now we're in their algorithm. And so now they're getting more of that, right? That paired with they're at home with their partners, their male partners and realizing, wow, I've never spent this amount of time with this before. And what am I doing? And like all of these aspects put together just kind of led to this exploding thing. I don't think it's new. I think what happened was people who wouldn't have been placed in a situation with lesbians that helped them to see them in a different way than what they thought. Now were because of social media, because of the algorithm. And the more they looked, the more it got. And now the more they thought about it, paired with all these other things that were happening in the world.
Well, it's so interesting because I came out back in the, late 80s and I used to go to the women's basketball games at my college and I'm like, oh my God, look at that lesbians over there. I'm never going to be with them or hang out with those women. Right. And I already knew I was gay since I was like 14, but I was like, I'm not going to be like those ladies. And now I'm that lady, right? Like I'm at the group, like I think when you get older, you just don't care as much.
Yeah, I remember, so I knew I was gay too, and I went to Northeastern University and I went to a hockey game one day and I saw a whole group of lesbians and I was scared of them, like the way they had short hair and I had this like fear, like this, like that's what I mean, but very quickly when I went out and hung out with them, like that just came down, the wall or the fear or the, things that I assumed or those thoughts in my head just went away when you get to talk to people and see them beyond the stereotype that you have in your head.
Well, and that, oh, Corey, go ahead.
I was going to just jump in and say too, that there's also a factor of our own age that's sort of biasing us a little bit. We're noticing later in life lesbians because this is the age group for later in life lesbians. Like I'm not hanging out with 20-year-olds right now, but when I was 20, maybe there were 40 and 50-year-olds that were later in life lesbians. We just didn't know about them because they weren't on social media and the climate wasn't nearly as welcoming for them to come out. Like you see all those movies of like, the the two
if these walls could talk.
Roommates. Yes. If these walls could talk, those are just heartbreaking. But the climate is a lot better to come out than it even was for those of us who did it in the 80s and 90s. Cause it was, it was terrifying. I mean, absolutely terrifying then.
But also it was terrifying, like you said, to see this group of lesbians. When I saw them at the basketball game, I was like, oh my God, they are scary. Like, look at them. They're going to beat us up after the game. And it's all based on what you're told growing up, right? These ladies with short hair and they're like more butchy. They're going to like beat you up. And they're like over there, having their popcorn, so excited to watch the game. And I'm like terrified of them. They're doing nothing towards me. But it's what society said over and over again. That's why I love Phil Donahue, because he was the first person I ever saw on TV have normal gay people on without it being, they were just on in jeans and a t-shirt and there was nothing like demonizing us. So I know more demonization's coming back, and demonization of trans people in our culture is coming full force. But it also seems that the new generation of people, it doesn't seem that they care that much. And they're not shocked or traumatized.
I agree. Yeah. Well, I mean, just in a matter of 10 years time, so much has changed,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I remember even the messaging that I heard, wasn't just even homophobic as a kid. It was like, you don't want to be gay because ... And it was like, almost like a warning, don't come out because you'll never be able to have children, which is not true. You'll never be able to get married, which we finally are able to do. You'll never be able to live a normal life. Like all these things were like, don't choose that path. So even if you might be gay because I mean, I've met a lot of later in life lesbians who didn't just sort of figure out that they, were attracted to women in their 40s. Some of them have known since they were 13 years old and have been harboring it because of, religious or cultural oppression or family dynamics or whatever. But the messaging was, don't even think about it, because these are the bad things that are going to happen to you. And some of those things are real. We know that oppression and discrimination exists, but when you're looking at, like people coming out, we know that there are some that have known forever that they're gay and they just finally come out, and some that just kind of figure it out, maybe again, stuck in, on the couch with, their male partner and go, wait a minute, hold on, during COVID. But from the people that you've talked to, have you seen, is there more of a pattern one way or the other? Are people just saying, I'm finally out after all these years? Or are they mostly just saying, I finally figured out that I might be attracted to women?
It goes both ways. So either they knew and they pushed it down, or, they're realizing, you guys, have you heard about compulsory heterosexuality?
No.
I kind of want to look up the definition because I don't know. But basically it's, the norms that we were born into society and what we were taught, and how it affects the brain. Like you are in the 4 Agreements, this is a book that I love. They call it domestication, right? Since the day you're born, you're told what's right or wrong, what's good or bad, what's pretty, what's ugly, male, female, blue, pink, whatever. And then you're rewarded or punished based on that. And your brain develops in that way. And so if you aren't around or exposed to anything outside of that, some people didn't even know it was an option. I hear them say that, like, I never even thought. Yeah. And now that I look back, there were certain things that I was like, oh, like that was definitely probably gay, but they didn't even know because their brain didn't even go there. Mm-hmm. So it really is, it just depends on the person, I feel.
And go ahead.
I had a funny story I have to say because of this. When you're saying like some people didn't even know it was an option. So like when I was younger, I remember having like these super attractive feelings towards a friend of mine that I knew. And I was in middle school and all my middle school friends were listening. Were like, was it me? Was it me? No, it wasn't you. It was none of my friends. But anyways, it was somebody that I was in school with, and I would write poems about her. But I told myself that I was writing those poems because I wasn't gay. It was because I wanted to be like her. She was like my role model. So I had almost domesticated myself in that sense, right? Like that every kind of like attraction to a woman that I could possibly have had for many, many years was not actual attraction. It was just envy or admiration of someone because I was kind of told that that's what it could be. And that was like, almost like, okay, I don't have to come out, even though I knew deep down, like looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I read some of those poems and they're like over the top. But
I think that's a lot of women's experience, exactly what you're describing. It's not,
that's what I'm talking about.
Comes from society, but then you keep piling it on yourself. And who wants to invite the life of, what we were told would be so horrible. Like,
exactly.
You know,
but I mean, it's like talking yourself into it. Like I was able to reframe it and be like, oh, it's just admiration. Like I didn't even need anyone else to do that for me. I did that as a way of saying, I don't want to come out in this, in this situation. I finally did come out, not too long after that, but I can think about other people as they're either hiding or maybe they don't recognize it, but maybe they don't recognize it because they've couched it in some other kind of emotion or attraction that seems less gay.
But like, go ahead.
No.
No, you go ahead.
Earlier I mentioned the 4 agreements and domestication, and in that they talk about how eventually you begin to self-domesticate, and that because once you learn that and once it's there, you don't need anybody else to tell you anymore because you've already developed that and that's become your belief. So you don't even need, you're that's where you're at. You start to self-domesticate.
Yeah.
Serena Joy in The Handmaid's Tale. That's what my best friend is a super ally. She's been an ally since long before it was cool. And we were on a trip one time and her daughter's straight. And she was like, oh, I would just feel bad. I wouldn't want my daughter to be gay because she might, suffer all these indignities that society throws at you. And I said, that is so insulting. I want you to take that back and reframe it. I said, you're saying that. I'm totally happy as a gay person. I have no issue being gay. I don't care about these things, but it's even the people who were sympathetic to us say that kind of stuff. Oh, well, I wouldn't want you to be gay because so if a woman was dating a guy and then they were telling their friends, well, maybe I'm gay or something, then they might be like, oh, well, I don't know. Your life's going to be so hard and it'll be so much easier with Joe, than Jane. And I think that that's even though that was well-meaning, it's really detrimental. And my friend did correct all of that, but it was like a dagger when I heard it. And I was like, God, what are you saying? And I used to do gay educating back in the 90s. And I mean, the questions it was like we were, from outer space. They really didn't understand us. And I said, if you gave me a pill today that could make me straight, I wouldn't take it. I don't have an issue with myself. You're the one who has the issue, not me, But
yeah. I think absolutely. And same, I wouldn't take the pill either. But at the same time, people who have said that to me and my mom, I don't think they would necessarily, or at least in my perspective, they didn't mean it would be easier for me because of me. They meant it would be easier for me because of society and the way that other people make it hard for us,
That's what I said. I said, why don't you, instead of saying you worry for us why don't you just say, I wish these people weren't such jerks, or I wish people wouldn't care, right? Don't put it on us. I think that's why it is harder for people to come out because, maybe they just don't realize that maybe it comes later in life, but there's a burden put on us that somehow there's something, that, we have to live with this burden. Our lives are going to be so hard. I've never found that to be the case. Whatever, there's hardships all around the world for all kinds of things. It's just, it is our cross to bear this, but it's not because of us. It's because of the other people,
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're doing it.
So let me ask a question then, Jamie, because I'm curious to know, again, some of the trends and patterns you've seen, and I know it doesn't speak for everybody's experiences, but do you find that when people are posting or even when you're meeting with them as a coach, do you find that people are sharing that coming out later in life is more of a liberating experience for them or stressful or a little bit of both, thinking about stress, like you talked about earlier about being questioned, particularly by family saying, wait a minute, hold on, you have this great marriage to this man and you have children and all this, or do you find that it's just liberating and some just say, I'm free?
It's both. It's same again. It's both ends of the spectrum. Some people are like, why am I blowing up my life? Whereas other people are like, oh my God, I'm finally myself, and this feels great. And it really just depends on where they are in the process. And some people I've seen
experience it all, right? They experience both.
And some of them go back,
right?
And even if they're not true, I've seen some that are truly gay, but go back because they feel bad for what it's doing to other people in their lives, like their kids or, and so it really is, it's not an easy thing to deal with.
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, the whole point of our podcast is about relationships, right? And, like I said, I've never had a romantic experience with someone who's a later in life lesbian, but I know Tracy was married to somebody who identified that way or, appeared that way given her coming out. What are some thoughts that you have around, how couples that we would say, you have a later in life lesbian and someone who isn't a later in life lesbian, are there some dynamics there that you have any ideas or recommendations or thoughts about that might be helpful to that couple?
I mean, I think it's always important to just always express your insecurities around something, on both ends, because, you had mentioned earlier, Tracy, about like not wanting to date bisexuals, right? And then as a later in life lesbians come out, people who are old school like us, because I agree, start to have those fears. But when I really think about it, the reason why I didn't want to date a bisexual is because I thought they were going to break my heart. I thought they were going to leave me for a man. But with life experience came the realization that a woman can leave me for a woman just as easily as she can leave me for a man, right? So I'm no longer afraid of bisexuals because a cheater is a cheater, regardless of, what the sex of the person they're cheating with is. And so when you can just be open and honest about your insecurities and really have those vulnerable conversations, like that's what's important. And on the other end of that, here comes a later in life lesbian who maybe feels like they're not experienced enough, or they don't feel like they have a place within the community. And now they're dating this person who's been seasoned, the seasoned lesbian, share that. And I think that would just be my biggest piece of advice is be vulnerable, be honest, be open to communicating and understanding each other on a different level.
See, again, communication, and also it's the way you do it. And I'm very guilty of doing it in a not a good way, because that was all my judgment and insecurity. And also just to me, it was so foreign. It was something I could not understand. Like, I don't get how you could be with that person for 25 years. And now want to be with somebody who's so opposite. That's what comes. But I found that now with, being with, a lifelong lesbian also, where it's like, well, how could you be with someone who's so different? And then, you know what I mean? I think the older you get, you just accept more. I was much less accepting when I was younger, very black and white.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. The older you get, the more you realize, you have life experience and see how people interact in the world and what that means and what it doesn't mean. And, and then you just act on it.
And then you get to a point where you tip over and then you're just stuck in your ways because you're so old that you can't.
Yeah, I think
you're that's the way it was for me.
I think that's 70 when we reach 70.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I was going to say, now I started following, I'm looking at all these groups. I'm in Club Lilles on Facebook. And you guys have some awesome vacations. So what if a person, I'm in your group because I met all those people at this show one night. And, what if I came on one of those trips? Would that be okay?
Absolutely. I mean, I go on the trip and I'm not a late in life lesbian. And here's the thing, so it started as late in life lesbians, but, it turned into something else because can I share a story with you guys for a minute?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So my view on things, and I know since y'all have been out for a while, maybe you can agree is, in my early 20s, when, again, sociology major in my brain works a lot. So I'm always looking and observing. And I realized that the gay scene and the lesbian scene in particular revolved a lot around alcohol, drugs, backstabbing, gossip, toxic behavior. And I always just wanted this other piece of a community that I can join that was lesbian focused, but didn't involve that stuff. And I always thought, oh, well, somebody will do it. Somebody will do it. Somebody will do it. And then, I wind up 40 years old and I'm like, oh, it's still not a thing, but here are my clients. Let's make this thing. And so we opened it up for late in life lesbians, but with the idea that, hey, I am also a life coach. So we're also going to be a high vibe group and we're not going to deal with gossip or drama or and so then that kind of spewed into, well, I'm not a late in life lesbian and there are more people that want to be a part of this type of community. So let's open it up to everybody. So although it started with later in life lesbian, we then opened it up to all people within the sapphic community who want to operate at a high vibe level and really just network with people and make new friends all over the world who are open and welcoming to bisexuals, to later in life lesbians, to people who are still on their path to figuring it out. And so it kind of has shifted and changed, so of course anyone can come on the, as long as you're within the sapphic community, can come on the trip with us, regardless of when you came out, but you have to be open and accepting. And that's what's important.
That's awesome.
That is great. So do you have, I'm imagining now with 8,000 people that you have people reaching out individually to you and are you sort of taking coaching clients from the group, or how do those two feed into each other, or are they totally separate things that you do?
I went back and forth with that. So, originally, it was for my clients and I went back and forth where I was like, don't share anything about your coaching the group. But like, ultimately, like, we're here because that's where it started, right? Mm-hmm. Coaching clients. And so I share my coaching stuff in the group, and people can join or they can ignore it. It's not something that they have to do, but I definitely share. And a lot of my clients, 99.9%, come from Club Lilles or finding me within the community that way.
That's awesome. So any recommendations you have for people who, you know, might be listening to this and this is their first kind of foray into thinking about their sexual orientation? Maybe they're not in Club Lilles yet. They haven't put themselves out there in any kind of public way, but maybe they're listening to this podcast episode by themselves while they're driving. They're like, what recommendations do you have for any of those folks to, you know, come into a safe space to try to explore maybe an attraction that they have to women without having to like full blown kind of come out and upend maybe a very complex heterosexual life that they're living?
I mean, I wouldn't know what to say other than like, that's what's happening within the group. Like people, cause you are allowed, you can post anonymously if you're scared. You can connect in that way. And I don't know other than that, like maybe because I'm not late in life, but to connect with other people on that level, like a group like that, I think, and not just Club Lilles, there are other groups out there as well. I think that is, you know, a really great place to start.
Well, it's just from my perspective looking at it, it's a great group, just so you know. And to have actually seen people in real life is kind of interesting, you know, because oftentimes with Facebook, we're never going to meet those people in real life. But,
right.
You know, I saw them in Phoenix together. They were so happy. And we had been approached when we did a live recording of this podcast by a woman who found us just by Google, but happened to be in the same town as us. And she asked us, could we do a podcast on later in life lesbians? Because she was having issues, you know, having just come out and being judged by people she was wanting to date, but they're like, no, you were just with a man. And, you know, there was another interesting story of a person who'd been with a man for a long time, but I think it had been a little while since she wasn't. Then she was going to date someone or go on a date with someone who had just recently gotten out of a relationship with a man. And she was like, well, I don't know. I need to grill this woman about this. And I'm like, but you're in the same boat, right? Like, it's very interesting because I think everyone's on like this path, like of what timing that they came out, you know? And like, I knew I was gay from like the time I was 14 or I mean, like I knew it, but I still had a boyfriend in high school and college, you know, because I was a survival, you know, I wanted to survive and not get killed. And I would always say to the boyfriend, don't you think I'm a lesbian? Don't you think I'm a lesbian?
He didn't really think anything of that. He wasn't like, why?
Well, he didn't, but times. I know my gay friend who I was just talking to was like, he was so hot. I would have dated him. I mean, he's super hot. He was, you know, a bit rebel. We never slept together, just disclosure for everybody. But it was like, you know, I asked over and over. And like, I think it's interesting. At that time, there was no such thing as social media. There weren't the like when I finally moved to Seattle, I was already out and there were like the bookstore with the magazines and whatnot. So the function that you're serving is so helpful, right? And it's so much more accessible than like, you know, having to be seen in public, picking up one of these magazines or, oh, you went into that gay bookstore in that gay neighborhood in Seattle, right? Where now you can just be at home. And I think it's so safe. And I've just seen post after post after post of people, and then they're getting support. It's just like I'm in this travel group for solo travel for over 50. And the women are generally so supportive of each other, you know? So yeah, it's absolutely. A real service you've done. I mean, I think it's incredible. And then to have actual in real life events is, you know, like icing on the cake.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember waiting till my mom would go to sleep when I lived at home. I was 18 years old. So then I could watch HBO and watch like Better Than Chocolate and really actually be, able to see lesbians and not in a way that's like, like, you know, like the token lesbian on some show. It's right. Like, oh, they're engaging in a human way. But I had to sneak around, you know, and I didn't want anyone to catch me and I didn't want them to see, did I watch that or something like that? Right. And so I totally understand.
Yeah. And I mean, it used to be you had to be in the gay ghetto, you know, you lived in this part of town. And so if you're there, you're engaging that stuff, you're at least a little bit out. But I used to meet men who were afraid, of going to a gay club. So they would have sex in these bushes in a park. And, I talked to them. I'm like, just go to this place. And we'd see, I did see one of those guys in the bar later. And just that night alone, he felt liberated. So it's very, very helpful. And I think social media, while everyone wants to tear it down, say it's so awful, I think it really does it's transformed society for the better in some ways. It brings out our worst parts, but you're allowing, 8,000 people, right? So if I'm a lesbian in some small town, or I'm getting divorced and I'm thinking, do I want to date a woman? Well, here's a way for you actually to get online and see people's stories before you ever even have to take a risk yourself. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think when it comes to social media, it's really what you do with it. If it's affecting your mental health, change your news feeds, silence people that do that. I think it can be a tool for such good, but also, yes, a tool for such bad. And it really is, it's, a knife can either cut a really nice steak that you're about to eat, or it can stab somebody. It depends on what the user does with it. Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I love the fact too, that you want to have a space where people are high vibing. I'm in a lot of lesbian social media groups, and it's there's constant bathroom selfies, and it's all supposed to be it's kind of sexualized. And I can only imagine when I was coming out, and particularly if I'm older and I've got a little bit more at stake to come out, I don't want to be in a space that feels that kind of hypersexualized. I want to be in a place where I feel safe, where I can talk about things that are scary, and that I can get support from people. And so it's really nice to be able to have that, because I do think it does counter a lot of what is out there. And I agree with you all on social media a lot. I just think I've joined a lot of groups that it's lesbian friends. And then all of a sudden it's hold on, what is some of the stuff people are posting? And so I think it can be intimidating for particularly later in life lesbians to say, okay, I think I'm attracted to women. I'm going to get on social media and see what's out there, and then come across all of these sites that are someone, blowing kisses into a mirror where they're wearing, something that they're my yoga outfit. I'm like, that is not a yoga outfit. That's
well, that's probably not a lesbian. Okay. Let's be real. That's probably
but at the end of the day though, that stuff is even terrifying to me. I can only imagine if you're I just want to have some conversations with people, and then all of a sudden you're bombarded. So, I think in a sense it's nice as more and more spaces are created for this high vibing conversations about things that are important and real, that are, that are more along that vein, I think are really serving the community. And that's probably, a part and parcel to why you have 8,000 people. I'm going to go join. I'm not, because I think that this is a great place for people to be able to gather and feel support.
Well, it's interesting because you're kind of the internet analog to the lesbian, bar. I don't know if you've listened to that podcast called Cruising, but I've binged there's several seasons.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I used to go to the Wild Rose all the time and be like, oh, this skanky bar. And my best friend who's straight, and I would go, and she'd be like, oh my God, we're going to go to that gross place again. And it was the only place to go. But now that I've heard the backstory and what it created for the people who used to go there, right? It was a safe place. Unfortunately, the brick and mortar places are disappearing, but you're replacing it with these online forums that I think are the analog to a lesbian bar that we need, so bravo to you.
Yeah. And I will say this, I'm glad that you said that about, the posts and stuff like that, because, sometimes running a Facebook group is weird. People get upset with you, and we have rules within the group because there needs to be some kind of guidelines to keep the vibe of the group the way that we want it. And people get upset with me. They think that I'm a dictator, that I'm this, that, and the other thing, because I'm not allowing certain posts or things to go in there, but really it's for a purpose to craft and create this experience that is important. And we have to protect that, in my opinion. So we didn't want it to be a dating group. We wanted it to be a high vibe group, and sure, so we'll let through some things, but a majority of the things that we won't, and so, it is what it is. I have to deal with that. People thinking that I'm being some kind of way just to be controlling or something like that, when really it goes beyond that. I have a much larger vision and an intention for why we're in there. And that's what it comes down to.
Well, that's great. Awesome. And I think that while there might be one person who gets upset that their post is denied, there's probably another 2,000 that they're thankful without even knowing it that you didn't allow that post on there, because that you are crafting a safe space. And, I've been on some groups where it's like, there's just a couple of questionable posts and I'm like, I'm out of here. And so it's a tough job. I got to hand it to you, and really thankful that you're being able to bring people together in connection and in support through this, this difficult time, because, the three of us are on here basically talking about a group of people that none of us are. And, my heart goes out to people who are really struggling with trying to figure out, whether they're coming out after all these years of being in the closet, or whether they're just discovering, their sexuality. Is like, this is really a hard time for you. And my heart goes out to you. And we need more people who are, every spectrum in the lesbian and sapphic community, as you say, to be supportive of people wherever they are in their journey. And I think that's what's important, is why you're creating this space for people to go, that the Tracys and me of the world also need to find ways to be supportive, because it's been so long since I've come out, and I had a lot less at stake. Honestly, I didn't have children, or I didn't have, a religious group that was, kind of.
Yeah, but you also did have a lot at stake. I mean, I have been killed in high school.
No, I mean,
you know what I mean?
We didn't have nothing at stake, but I'm saying if I would have come out later, I might have had more at stake in terms of at least disrupting other people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would have been murdered.
Well, I mean, I could have been, any of us could have been, we can still be murdered. But my point is my coming out was less disruptive for other people, because I wasn't breaking up an existing marriage. I wasn't having to tell my kids that I'm leaving for another woman. Like, so my whole point is that I know that I need to be more intentional. And I'm hoping that our listeners out there who don't identify as, later in life lesbians, that heed this call to say, this is a tricky time. And some of us don't even recall our coming out process. And so let's be supportive and caring and show love to those who are going through this.
Absolutely. I agree.
In so many ways, Corey, for everything, right? I mean, that's what we need to be doing. I mean, truly, just stop being, and I am judgmental. So like, I own it, but like, we're judgmental people. We're human beings, right? And it's taken me decades to be more accepting, but it's also because, frankly, this is, I think, what the podcast Cruising really addresses because they interview all these people, is that it was very dangerous to be openly gay. You could be arrested, you could be killed, you could be, beat up in an alley. Like, you had to find people who were going to be safe for you to be out to. You could lose your job, And so going to these bars or being around people that you might see at that bar was really a matter of, I need to find people who I can be myself with, who it's not going to be a risk to me.
Well, and unfortunately, it's still like that in many places.
But now we have Club Lilles.
Exactly. We have some online safe spaces, and we do have a lot of accepting and wonderful supportive people and places that we can go, and some more geographically centered than others. But so let's talk about Club Lilles. So if people want to join, you said you're open to anyone who's in the sapphic community who wants to be connected and supportive in this space. Do they just go to Facebook and find the group and then request to join?
Yeah, you can do that. Make sure you spell it right, which is Club Lilles. Or, if they find me on social media, there's links in my bio that go to the group. We also have clublilles.com. So again, Lilles, it's clublilles.com, where you could find the group and upcoming events. And that's really the major ways to be able to find the group. We're not out there on Facebook advertising it, because, we want it to we don't want infiltrators going in there. So, you do have to answer some questions to join and agree to the rules. And we might take a little look at your profile, because we really want to keep it a safe and protected space.
Good. That's great.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we have thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you today. This is great. This is a conversation that is so important for us to have. And I know we have this one episode dedicated to it, but I do think it's important for us to keep talking about it.
And what if somebody wants coaching from Coach Jaime? How do they find you?
I love that. Yeah. Social media. So it's just my name. So it's spelled Jaime, Jaime Messina. That's on Instagram, Jaime Messina. TikTok is Jaime Messina. You can find me there. You can find me on Facebook. Send me a message. And I also actually have JaimeCoaches.com.
JaimeCoaches.com.
You just have to make sure you spell it like Jaime.
Yes, Jaime.
Yes, or Jaime.
Got it. Well, there's so many ways for our listeners to get a hold of you. So, and, once we release this, look for, maybe a little surge of members, because I'm hoping that this inspires people to join.
I hope so.
Again, Jaime, thank you for the great conversation and for providing all these resources. And thank you for the work that you're doing. Particularly, I think, because you don't necessarily even identify as a later in life lesbian, but see that there's such a need for this, and are able to use your resources and your time and energy to help create a space to bring people together. And I think that's wonderful. So thank you. Keep up the good work. I'm going to keep following you, and we're just so glad to have you on. So again, thank you everyone. And thank you to our listeners. And until our next episode, go out there and rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship, and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.